Welcome to DRS Zone. We are dropping straight into the red line today because, man, what we just witnessed at the Australian Grand Prix was a seismic shift in the world of motorsport.
Oh, absolutely. It changed everything.
It really did. So if you are joining us right now, strap in. This is not your casual weekend recap. This is a high-octane deep dive into the completely unfiltered, highly complex chaos of the 2026 Formula One regulations.
And we really need to unpack this.
We do. And just to give you some context up front, this segment is part of our news coverage of recent F1 events. We've gathered a stack of insider reports, intense paddock chatter, and raw technical breakdowns to decode exactly what happened in Albert Park.
Because there is so much to cover.
Exactly. We are tearing apart the masterclass and, honestly, the severe controversy of the new Mercedes engine. We are looking at the heartbreaking engineering failures of some of the sport's most historic teams, and we're taking you straight into the ruthless boardroom maneuvers happening behind closed doors.
It is entirely necessary to set the stage properly here, because the noise surrounding these new regulations is deafening right now. I mean, purists are loudly claiming that the new rules are ruining the sport, right?
Yeah, they're everywhere.
They're arguing that the soul of Formula One is being sacrificed for the sake of relevance. But the truth is much more complex and, frankly, much more thrilling. Because the telemetry and the data we are looking at prove that we are currently witnessing the most cutthroat, tightly compressed grid in a decade.
Even if the race winner seems like a foregone conclusion right now.
Exactly.
But I want to challenge that a bit because the whole efficiency debate is fiercely dividing the fan base. People are frustrated. They are arguing that F1 has abandoned raw, blistering speed and traded it for what? An energy conservation exercise.
Well, that's what it looks like on the surface.
Right. But what you have to realize is that energy recovery in Albert Park was incredibly complicated this year under the new formulas. I mean, we are talking about a track layout with sweeping high-speed sections and a distinct lack of heavy braking zones.
Which completely changed the game.
It did. Can you break down why that specific track characteristic threw the entire grid into total chaos?
Yeah, it comes down to the fundamental physics of the 2026 power units. So the new regulations demand a 50-50 power split between the internal combustion engine and the electrical system.
Right.
And to generate that electrical power, the MGUK, the motor generator unit kinetic, relies heavily on sustained, heavy braking to harvest kinetic energy. But Albert Park isn't Monza. It isn't Bahrain.
No, it's super fluid.
Exactly. It has fast chicanes. Because there aren't many places to brake hard, drivers were forced to lift and coast in bizarre sections of the track simply to charge the battery.
Just to survive the lap.
Literally. If you didn't do that, you'd deploy your battery out of a corner and suddenly find yourself with a severe power deficit on the ensuing straight.
Which perfectly explains why the teams look so completely in the dark heading into this new era. I mean, to give you an idea of the sheer uncertainty out there, look at what Lewis Hamilton said during testing in Bahrain.
Oh, that quote is incredible.
Right. A reporter asked him point blank, will the fastest car win or will the most efficient car win? And Hamilton looked at him and literally replied, I have no idea, man.
Nobody knew.
No one fully understood the assignment. The entire grid was essentially guessing. Well, almost the entire grid, because the telemetry shows that Mercedes understood the assignment perfectly.
They didn't just understand it. They engineered a spectacular advantage. Mercedes dominated the weekend, operating in an entirely different performance window. But the bombshell that has the entire paddock up in arms is the performance of their client teams.
This is the crazy part.
McLaren, Williams, Alpine, who all buy their engines from Mercedes, were unmitigated disasters on track. It begs the question, how does the factory team build a rocket ship while the teams buying their exact same engines look like they are driving through wet cement?
Exactly. Let's look at the rule book, because I really want to understand if this was a brilliant engineering feat or something a bit more cynical from Toto Wolff. We are talking about Appendix C6, Article 1.4 of the 2026 regulations, right?
That's the one.
This mandates that the hardware and the software provided by a manufacturer to its client teams must be identical. There is no debate there. So, if McLaren and Williams received the exact same hardware in the back of the factory Mercedes, how did the factory team gap them so significantly?
Because Mercedes didn't break the rules. They weaponized their timeline.
Oh, that is ruthless.
Highly ruthless. They intentionally hid their final engine specification and the corresponding deployment software until the very last week of testing in Bahrain.
Wait, so they had the physical engine?
Yes. Think of the power unit like a high-performance computer. The engine mapping is its operating system. This mapping dictates exactly when the battery deploys energy and when it harvests it.
Right.
Mercedes gave their clients the physical hardware, but they basically withheld the final optimized software update until the night before the exam.
So they legally starved their own clients of the simulation data they needed to survive. That is insane.
Yes.
And McLaren's team principal, Andrea Stella, is absolutely furious. He is publicly claiming a total lack of transparency. McLaren couldn't get the necessary simulation data from Mercedes' high-performance powertrains.
And in modern F1, that is everything.
You do the work in the simulator back at the factory. You arrive at the track ready to fine-tune. But without that data, McLaren had to write their own code while driving at 200 miles per hour. They had to figure out these insanely complex energy deployment mappings directly on the track during free practice.
Which is a monumental disadvantage. Stella pointed out that they were reacting in real time. They would run the car, look at the telemetry, and say, oh, so that's how the engine behaves under these specific loads.
You can't work like that.
No, you cannot compete for a championship when you are learning your own car's basic functions during a race weekend. Now contrast McLaren's outrage with Williams.
Right, James Vowles.
Yeah, James Vowles, who has deep historic ties to Mercedes from his time as their strategy director, played the diplomat. He admitted that the engine mapping caught them completely off guard, confessing it was costing them 0.3 of a second per lap.
0.3 is an eternity.
That's massive. Yet he still insisted that Mercedes was acting in good faith and that Williams simply needed to catch up.
I have to ask, though, if I'm a team principal, why on earth would I tolerate that? I mean, look over at the Ferrari camp. Their client teams, like Haas, are practically singing Maranello's praises for total transparency and support. Ferrari gave them the data months ago.
Exactly.
What does this aggressive strategy from Toto Wolff actually accomplish, other than alienating his customers?
It accomplishes dominance.
Yeah?
Wolff is legally starving his potential rivals of the knowledge required to challenge him. It is a severe warning shot across the bow of the entire grid. For teams like McLaren, it proves a harsh reality about the 2026 era.
Which is what...
If you want to win a world championship, you might need to build your own engines. You cannot rely on a supplier who is also your biggest rival. Red Bull realized this years ago, which is why they partnered with Ford, and Audi is entering as a full works team.
That makes total sense. But while the politics are intense, I really want to pivot to the actual on-track product, because we witnessed the return of something we haven't seen in a long time.
Imperfect racing.
Yes, imperfect racing. For years, F1 was just too refined. It was a procession, perfectly simulated in a factory, and Sunday was just a high-speed parade where cars rarely broke down. But Australia gave us glorious, unpredictable mechanical fragility.
And that mechanical fragility adds a profound layer of excitement that has honestly been missing. We saw spectacular, unpredictable failures.
Blake Verstappen.
Yes. Max Verstappen, the dominant force of the last generation of cars, was completely neutralized by an unpredictable rear axle failure. The new active aerodynamic loads put unprecedented stress on the suspension components, and the materials simply gave up.
Just snap.
And then you have Oscar Piastri, driving in front of his home crowd, suddenly experiencing an unexplainable 100-kilowatt energy surge that sent him straight into the wall.
Let's pause on that Piastri crash for a second, because 100-kilowatt surge sounds like sci-fi jargon. What actually happened inside that McLaren to pitch him into the barrier so violently?
Right, so a 100-kilowatt surge equates to roughly 134 horsepower instantly and unexpectedly kicking in.
Oh my God.
In the 2026 regulations, there is a highly delicate software handshake between the internal combustion engine and the electrical deployment from the MGUK. As Piastri was applying the throttle out of a sweeping corner, expecting a linear power delivery, a software glitch caused the battery to dump a massive spike of energy all at once to the rear wheels.
You can't catch that.
Impossible. The tires instantly broke traction, and no driver on Earth has the reaction time to catch a sudden 134 horsepower spike mid-corner.
And beyond the software glitches, we saw actual engine smoke, the return of the barbacoa. We haven't seen an internal combustion engine violently let go in a cloud of white smoke like that in years.
It was nostalgic in a way.
It really was. Now, obviously, safety is always paramount, and nobody wants to see drivers in danger. But that mechanical fragility means a driver leading by 25 seconds isn't guaranteed a win anymore. The race isn't over until the checkered flag drops.
It completely changes the psychology of the race. And while Mercedes is currently operating in a league of their own, the reality for the rest of the grid is that it is an absolute knife fight.
It's so tight.
If you exclude the two Mercedes cars, the top 7 cars were within 1 single second of each other in qualifying.
That is wild.
Think about that level of compression. In 2025, that level of competition for pole position was totally non-existent. The ceiling might be defined by Brackley, but the midfield has dramatically compressed.
Okay, I hear you on the compressed grid, but let me push back a bit here. Does a 1-second gap in qualifying actually matter to the fans if Mercedes is still going to disappear 20 seconds up the road on Sunday? Did the on-track racing actually deliver a better product for the viewer?
I argue it did, but in a different way than we are used to. Pirelli and Mari Wisala delivered a tire compound that allowed drivers to actually push.
Finally.
Right, meaning we finally had a weekend where we weren't just talking about thermal degradation and boring tire management for 50 laps. Because the tires held up, the overtaking felt completely different.
It wasn't just DRS strains?
No, it wasn't just simple DRS flybys on a straight. It was strategic energy warfare. Drivers were holding back their battery deployment, setting traps like a chess match. It was highly reminiscent of Formula E tactics, where sacrificing track position momentarily might be the key to winning the long game by having a battery advantage on the final lap.
That strategic depth is absolutely fascinating. But it also brutally exposed the teams that failed to adapt to this new reality. Which brings us to what the paddock is already calling the Spanish tragedy.
A fitting name.
It's the absolute engineering disasters happening at Aston Martin and Williams, heavily impacting Fernando Alonso and Carlos Sainz. Let's start with Aston Martin. They had immense hype coming into the season. They brought in Adrian Newey, arguably the greatest aerodynamicist in the history of the sport.
The legend himself.
Yet the car is a miserable failure, and Newey is already publicly complaining about the new Honda batteries. Why is the aerodynamics guy complaining about battery cells?
Because in 2026, the battery is the aerodynamic bottleneck. Newey's complaints about the Honda cells come down to energy density and thermal degradation. If battery cells get too hot too quickly, the system derates.
Meaning it cuts power.
Exactly, it cuts power to protect itself. To prevent that, the battery requires significant cooling. But Newey's aerodynamic philosophy relies on ultra-tight, shrink-wrapped packaging at the rear of the car to maximize airflow over the diffuser.
Right, he wants it as sleek as possible.
Always. But the Honda batteries are running too hot, forcing Aston Martin to open up the bodywork with larger cooling louvers, which completely ruins the aerodynamic flow Newey designed. It is an unacceptable lack of integration for a team claiming to have championship ambitions.
That is a phenomenal insight. It shows how every single component is linked now, and the situation over at Williams seems equally disastrous, if not worse, for Carlos Sainz.
It's a nightmare.
This is a contract year for him. He fought his way through a brutal 2025 season to land this seat, and now he is trapped in a car that is a heavy aerodynamic nightmare. Williams has infinite wind tunnel time as a lower-ranked team. They have a massive budget now. They brought in huge technical hires, and they have the class-leading Mercedes engine. So why did the chassis they delivered fail so spectacularly?
If we analyze Williams with brutal honesty, the excuses have run out. The correlation between their wind tunnel and the actual track was clearly broken by the new active aerodynamic rule.
They missed the mark.
Completely. They designed a car that works perfectly in a simulated wind tunnel, but out on the track, the chassis is severely overweight. They over-engineered the survival cell to meet the new 2026 crash test structures, adding significant bulk. And the active aerodynamics, we saw an F2-level embarrassment with their rear wing.
Yes, the rear wing wouldn't even close properly during the race. How does a modern Formula One team send a car out with a DRS flap that gets stuck open?
It comes down to the DRS actuator mechanism failing under the unprecedented aerodynamic load of the new 2026 rear wing profiles.
But didn't they see that in practice?
They did. And when a team fails to react to a problem that was glaringly obvious in free practice, and brings that exact same mechanical issue into Sunday's race, it speaks to deep, systemic structural problems within the engineering department. Sainz is driving a tractor right now, and he knows it.
It's a tragedy for his career momentum. But while the midfield is struggling to keep their cars together, let's take you off the track and straight into the boardroom, because the politics right now are arguably more intense than the racing.
Without a doubt.
The craziest rumor in the paddock right now involves Alpine and Toto Wolff. What is happening there?
It is rapidly becoming more than just a rumor. The word is that Otro Capital, the investment group, is actively looking to sell its 24% stake in the Alpine F1 team.
Okay.
For months, the paddock assumed Christian Horner was sniffing around looking to expand Red Bull's influence. But now, Toto Wolff has reportedly swooped in with a significant offer to buy that stake himself.
Wait, let's connect the dots here. We just spent the first segment talking about how furious McLaren and Williams were about Mercedes hiding their engine mapping data. But notice how Alpine was the only Mercedes client team that was not complaining about their engines this weekend.
They were totally silent.
Exactly. Is that a coincidence?
In Formula One, there are no coincidences. If Toto Wolff and Mercedes buy into Alpine, the master plan becomes crystal clear. Wolff instantly gains immense political voting power in the paddock. He essentially creates a voting bloc to counter Ferrari and Red Bull when it comes to future regulation changes.
That is brilliant.
And more importantly, he creates a de facto Mercedes B team. They have wanted this for a decade, a dedicated place to train rookie drivers, groom young engineers, and test developmental concepts without risking the factory team's budget.
Wow.
But for Renault, the majority owner of Alpine, it would be the ultimate humiliation. A historic, championship-winning manufacturer slowly fading away, reduced to a mere extension of the Mercedes empire.
It is unbelievable maneuvering from Wolff. And despite all this boardroom drama, and despite the purists claiming the sky is falling because the cars are different, Formula One is exploding financially. The sport is historically healthy.
The numbers don't lie.
Just look at the metrics from the weekend. Nearly 500,000 people attended the Albert Park weekend. That is the best attendance figure in Australia since Adelaide in 1995.
And the global broadcast metrics back that up entirely. Viewership in Italy is up 30%, largely driven by the immense hype surrounding Kimi Antonelli at Ferrari.
People are tuning in.
They are. Now, yes, we have to acknowledge a slight 9% dip in the Spanish market, but that is directly tied to the terrible machinery Alonso and Sainz are currently stuck in. Globally, the sport is thriving.
Thriving is an understatement. Audi is officially back on the grid with the iconic 4 rings, and now we are hearing that Chinese automotive giant BYD is in exploratory talks with FIA President Mohammed bin Sulayem to join the grid. Why BYD? Why now?
Because the 2026 rules focus heavily on electrification and battery efficiency, which is BYD's entire global market strategy.
That makes perfect sense.
It completely invalidates the argument that the sport is in decline. When titans like Audi and potentially BYD are fighting to get a spot on the grid, it proves that the 2026 regulations, despite their growing pains and technical controversies, have achieved their primary goal, making Formula One the absolute pinnacle of automotive technological relevance again.
So let's bring this all back to you, the listener. We have seen the 2026 regulations take the grid, flip it upside down, and shake it. We've got Mercedes playing a ruthless game, weaponizing their engine software against their own client.
And winning because of it.
We've got historic teams like Williams and Aston Martin crumbling under the pressure of new aerodynamic loads and battery constraints. And we have billionaires fighting over team ownership to create political voting blocs. But before anyone starts demanding that the FIA rip up the rulebook, we need to wait. We have to see what happens in the next few races, especially the upcoming sprint weekend in China, before we truly know how this championship will unfold.
And that leaves us with a critical tangent implication to consider. We spent this time discussing how a manufacturer can legally manipulate its clients by withholding software updates, forcing engineers to guess deployment strategies at 200 miles per hour. But what happens next year? If software decides the race, and human engineers cannot keep up with the sheer volume of simulation data, what happens in 2027 when teams inevitably start using AI algorithms to write those engine maps in real time? Are we about to see a sport where an algorithm, rather than a team principle, decides who wins a world championship?
Now that is a terrifying and fascinating thought to chew on. Are we watching a driver's sporting championship, or are we watching a Silicon Valley proxy war disguised as a Sunday race? Keep your foot pinned to the gas and do not miss a second of this incredible season. Make sure you are following DRS Zone across all of our platforms, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, so you never miss a single corner of the action. We will see you on the next deep dive.